She was only 12, too small to carry a baby, too young to carry pain this heavy. But none of that mattered to her stepmother. The debt had to be paid, and she was the price. No school, no love, no protection, just a stranger's bed, night after night, with wounds no one could see and others too deep to heal. This is the beginning of a story so painful, it could only be true. The sky was unusually quiet that morning, as if even the birds had nothing joyful to sing. Amara, just 12, swept the dusty yard of her late father's compound with trembling hands. She had grown used to hunger, but not the look in her stepmother's eyes that morning. It wasn't anger, it was finality. The night before, a grumbling old man had come to their door, demanding repayment. The chief, the same man who once came to greet her father and now came to collect what her family owed, land or girl. Her stepmother didn't hesitate. She offered Amara like a goat at the market. No goodbye, no explanation, just a torn wrapper, an empty sack, and the command to follow. By noon, Amara was gone. Sold, without her consent, her voice, or her future. The chief's compound smelled of palm oil and something sour. Amara had never seen so many people who looked so empty. No one smiled. No one spoke to her. The chief, old enough to be her grandfather, showed her the room she would sleep in, the same room he would violate her in night after night. She tried to cry the first time, but he slapped her silence. He said, "You're not a child anymore. You're my wife now." She bled. She screamed. No one came. Every day she cooked, fetched water from the stream, washed clothes she would never wear, and swept floors with trembling hands. Every night she was his. Every night she died a little more. The villagers saw her belly swell, but no one asked questions. No one dared. The chief was too powerful, and she was just a girl with no father. Her body ached constantly. She bled sometimes, but there was no midwife, no medicine. She begged to see a doctor. The chief laughed. "You'll give birth like your mother did, in silence." Her stepmother never visited. She heard from the chief that the woman had told him. She was a burden anyway. Amara started talking to the wind, to the river, to the moon. She had no one, and yet somehow she still hoped. One morning, heavy with pain and hunger, Amara went to fetch water. The journey was slow. Her eyes were dim, her hands cold. At the edge of the stream, she dropped her calabash and fell to her knees. She tried to rise, but the world tilted. Her last memory was the sun fading behind a tree. She collapsed. For hours, no one noticed. For an entire night, no one searched. The chief thought she was running away. He was too angry to care. Her stepmother called it God's punishment. And so Amara lay half dead under the open sky, her unborn child still inside her. Morning came again. Birds chirped, unaware of the girl still lying by the stream. Then footsteps. Light, unfamiliar. A young woman in NYSC khaki trousers paused. She had come to this village for community health service. She was on her way to visit the only borehole in the area when she saw something strange by the stream. A girl, barely breathing. She dropped her bag and rushed over. Checked her pulse. Still alive. Her eyes filled with tears as she whispered, "My God, who did this to you?" She carried Amara somehow on her back. The girl hadn't opened her eyes. But for the first time in a long time, help had arrived. As the bus raced toward the city hospital, the NYSC doctor held Amara's fragile body and made a silent promise. She didn't know this girl's story yet, but she would fight like hell to rewrite the ending. Because no child deserves to be broken like On's. When they found her, she was barely alive, wounded, pregnant, and silent. The world had already given up on her. But fate had other plans. In a hospital miles away from pain, a new life began to take shape. Not just for the child in her womb, but for the woman she would one day become. A woman no one saw coming. A woman who would return, not to suffer, but to seek justice. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and soft hope. Machines beeped steadily. Amara's eyelids fluttered, and when she finally opened her eyes, she didn't recognize the ceiling. She saw white walls, sunlight, and a woman watching her with kindness she hadn't seen in years. "You're safe," the NYSC doctor whispered. "You made it." But the journey was far from over. Her body had almost shut down. The tests showed pelvic inflammatory disease, severe infections, and a dangerous loss of blood. She was 7 months pregnant. The doctors debated whether the baby could survive. Amara heard whispers. Too weak, too young, too much trauma. But she clutched her belly and whispered, "Please live. You're all I have." It was a stormy night when Amara screamed from her hospital bed. The baby was coming early. Too early. Doctors rushed in, and the NYSC doctor held her hand the whole time. Amara bit her lip until it bled, refusing to scream. It was quick, bloody, and terrifying. Then a cry. A thin, shrill, beautiful cry. A baby boy, small but breathing. Alive. Tears flowed from her eyes for the first time in months. She whispered, "You're mine. I'll protect you." But the doctor looked at her differently now. Not with pity, but with a promise. "When you're strong enough, tell me everything." After her recovery, Amara sat in the garden with her son sleeping on her chest. She told the doctor everything: the chief, the forced marriage, the pain, the betrayal. The doctor's mother, a widowed lawyer, came to visit. She listened in silence, then said, "You have fire in your voice, even when you whisper." A month later, she offered to adopt Amara and her baby. "I will give you what you were denied: shelter, food, safety, and school." Amara took the name Amarachi, God's grace. She went to school. She cried over books. She nearly gave up. But her son's laughter reminded her what she was fighting for. Years passed. She studied law, and never forgot the faces of those who broke return. The sun was blazing the day she walked into the village again, this time in black heels and a law certificate tucked under her arm. She went first to the local police station, then, with officers beside her, to the compound of the now frail old chief. He didn't recognize her at first. "Do you remember the 12-year-old you bought for a debt?" she asked. His eyes widened. "I came back to finish the story." Her stepmother was also arrested. She didn't speak. She just stared at the girl she once sold like a sack of yam. But Amarachi wasn't hers anymore. She belonged to Justiceless. The courtroom was silent as Amarachi stood, calm and tall. She testified with tears, but not weakness. The evidence was clear. The chief and her stepmother were found guilty of child trafficking, abuse, and sexual assault. They were sentenced. And as the gavel fell, Amarachi wept, not for them, but for the girl she used to be. Now, she travels across Africa, speaking to girls in villages, in schools, in shelters. She tells them, "You are not alone. You are not for sale. You are not weak. And your story is not over." Her baby, now a teenager, often stands beside her, proud of the mother who didn't just survive. She rose. And she spoke. And she changed every. Some scars are invisible. Some wounds never fully close. But with courage, the broken can rebuild. Amarachi did not just escape, she transformed. And now, she stands for every girl whose pain has been silenced. This is not just her story. It is a mirror, a movement, and a call to rise.